You ever seen real power? Not the kind that flashes in a hand or barks through a barrel. Real power is the man who can sit in a room full of predators, stir sugar into his espresso, and make every other heartbeat sink to his spoon. That man in Chicago had a name nobody said twice: Marco Santoro. People called him the Undertone, because the louder the city got, the quieter he became. He didn't need to threaten. His silence did it for him. And on a rain-black Tuesday in November, his weakness didn't come wearing lipstick or carrying a ledger. It came through the front door of a private dinner, as a 5-year-old girl with crimson on her fingers and terror in her eyes. She was soaked to the bone, shivering hard enough to rattle her teeth. Her little pink coat was torn at the shoulder, one sleeve hanging by threads. She took one step onto the imported marble, and her wet sneakers squeaked so loudly the entire room turned. The maitre d', a sweating man named Paolo, lifted both hands like he could physically push the storm back outside. "Sweetheart, you can't. This is a closed event." She didn't even look at him. She looked past the linen, past the waiters frozen mid-step, past the men who carried weapons like they were wallets, straight into the far corner booth, where a man in a charcoal suit sat with his back to the wall, eyes on the door. Marco Santoro. For a second, she stared like she'd found the only lighthouse in a dead sea. Then she ran. Bruno, Marco's right hand, built like a refrigerator, half rose, instinct snapping his palm toward his waistband. Marco lifted one finger. That was it. Bruno stopped as if the air had turned to cement. The room went silent. Even the clink of glass died out. The only sound was the child's frantic feet and the rain hammering the windows. She hit Marco's booth so hard it bumped the table. Her hands, small, shaking, slick with someone else's blood, grabbed his lapel and smeared red across the expensive fabric like a confession. "Please," she screamed, voice cracking in half. "Please, mister, they're beating my mama." Marco stared at the blood on his suit like it was an omen. Then he looked at her face. Not just fear, not just panic. Bruise marks, finger-shaped shadows blooming along the soft skin of her neck. A split lip she'd tried to wipe clean. "What's your name?" Marco asked. His voice was low, calm, and somehow that calm made the whole room colder. "Lila," she choked out. They're in the alley. They said they'll break her. They said they'll make her." Marco set his fork down with surgical care. The scrape of metal against porcelain sounded like a verdict. "Show me," he said. "Boss," Bruno warned under his breath. "This smells like bait. Distraction. Somebody wants you outside." Marco didn't even turn his head. Lila clutched his hand with both of hers like she'd drown without it. "Please." Marco stood. The chair dragged across the floor like a blade leaving a sheath. "Bruno, Nico, with me," Marco said. To the rest of the table, without raising his voice, "Finish your meal." They moved through the front entry into the Chicago rain. The city didn't drizzle. It attacked. Cold needles that stung the face. Lila ran beside him, tiny fingers locked around his, leading him with the desperation of a child who already understood how the world works when no one helps. 2 blocks later, behind a dead bakery with a shuttered sign and a side door nailed shut, the alley narrowed into rot and shadow. The smell hit first: garbage, wet concrete, and fear. Then the sound, the dull slap of impact, a woman's breath knocked out of her. "Please, I don't have it," a woman gasped. A man laughed like gravel in a blender. "You don't have it? You think that's a sentence? Pay the interest, sweetheart, or we keep taking it out of your face." Marco rounded the corner. 3 men, 2 holding a woman upright against brick, one winding his arm back like he enjoyed the rhythm. The woman's blonde hair was matted, one eye swollen shut, her uniform torn, but even half broken, she was still trying to kick and claw like an animal that refused to die quietly. Then she saw Lila. "Baby!" Her voice cracked into agony. "Run! Run!" Lila jerked toward her mother. Marco's hand tightened on the girls. "Stay behind me." The man with the grin turned. The rainwater on his face made him look like he was melting. He recognized Marco immediately. The color drained from him so fast it was almost funny. Mr. Santoro," he stammered, lowering his raised fist like gravity had changed. I didn't know this was, I swear, I thought." Marco didn't pull a gun. He didn't shout. He just looked at him the way you look at a cockroach in your kitchen at 3 a.m. "What's your name?" Marco asked, soft. The man swallowed. "Terry." Marco nodded once as if cataloging trash. "Terry." The woman sagged, coughing. Her knees tried to give out. One of the goons tightened his grip to keep her upright. She hissed in pain and still tried to twist free. "She owes," Terry blurted, desperate to justify. 10 grand, late 3 weeks, it's business." Marco's eyes flicked to the woman. She was crawling, not away, but toward Lila, shielding her child with her body like instinct was the only religion left. Business, Marco repeated. He took one step forward. Terry lifted his hands. We were just collecting. Marco moved. It didn't look like a big man's movement. It looked like a trap snapping shut. He caught Terry's wrist as the man tried to pull a knife free. A twist, sharp, exact, then a crack that split the alley like thunder. Terry screamed. Marco didn't even blink. The goons flinched back, hands up, eyes wide. They understood what the city understood. If they escalated, they didn't just die, they disappeared. Leave, Marco said. They didn't hesitate. They ran, splashing through puddles, slipping over garbage, escaping like rats from fire. Marco stepped close to Terry, who was on his knees, clutching his broken wrist and sobbing into the rain. Marco crouched, grip firm under Terry's jaw, forcing him to look up. If you ever come near them again, Marco said quietly, I won't break bone. I'll dismantle you, piece by piece, and I'll make sure the parts never reunite. Terry nodded frantically. Yes, please. Marco let go. He turned. The woman was shaking so hard her teeth clicked. She tried to stand and failed. Her arms trembled as she held Lila like she was trying to fuse their bodies together. Marco approached slowly, not because he was afraid of her, because she was. She flinched when he got close, raising an arm to protect her face. Her eyes were sharp even through swelling, green, intelligent, exhausted. I'm not here for payment, Marco said. She didn't believe him. He pulled his heavy coat off, draping it over her shoulders. The fabric swallowed her, warm and heavy, smelling of tobacco and winter. I can't, she whispered, voice shaking. I can't afford. You don't have to, Marco replied. He lifted her into his arms. She stiffened for a heartbeat, then her strength collapsed. Her head fell against his chest like she'd been holding herself upright with sheer will for months. Lila ran beside them, crying silent tears. Inside the armored sedan, Bruno watched through the rear view like he was waiting for a bullet. Marco ignored it. He looked at the torn name tag on the woman's uniform. Nora. He spoke into his satellite phone, voice a blade wrapped in velvet. Get Dr. Kazan to the Lakeshore unit, now. And I want everything on Nora Hale, who she owes, who sold the debt, and why a bottom feeder thought he had permission to use that kind of violence. He hung up. Lila's little voice trembled from the seat beside her mother. Is she gonna die? Marco met the child's gaze. Not tonight, he said. Not while I'm breathing. Outside, the rain kept falling like the city was trying to drown its own sins. Marco didn't know yet that the debt wasn't about money. He didn't know yet that Nora Hale wasn't just a waitress. He didn't know yet that by stepping into that alley, he'd just accepted an invitation to a war he couldn't walk away from. But somewhere in Chicago, men who liked their problems solved with fire were already hearing about a child with blood on her hands and the devil who carried her mother out of the dark. The Lakeshore residence wasn't a home. It was a private fortress dressed up as luxury. The elevator opened straight into marble and silence. No hallway, no neighbors, no witnesses. Just a foyer with cold art and warmer security. Marco carried Nora in like she weighed nothing. Bruno cradled Lila in one arm, the big man's expression unusually careful, like he was afraid his size alone could break the child. Lila's face was pressed into his shoulder, but her fingers stayed locked on her mother's sleeve. Guest room, Marco told Bruno, voice hushed. Keep her dry. Hot cocoa if she'll drink it. And don't let her out of your sight. Bruno nodded, then hesitated. Boss, what if it's bait? Marco finished. He didn't look away from Nora. Then they picked the wrong hook. He laid Nora on a leather couch beneath a chandelier that could buy a block of the south side. Under the clean light, the brutality showed clearer. Bruises layered under bruises, fresh cuts, broken skin, malnutrition in her cheeks, fear in the way her body stayed tense, even unconscious. 20 minutes later, Dr. Kazan arrived, Greek, frantic, expensive, and loyal by debt. He worked fast. He spoke little. When he finished, he wiped his hands and looked at Marco like he wanted to ask a question and also wanted to live. She has cracked ribs, concussion, dehydration. She's been running on panic for a long time, Kazan said. I sedated her lightly. She needs sleep, fluids, calm. Kazan glanced toward the guest room. The girl? Unhurt, Marco said. Kazan nodded. Slipping the cash, Marco pressed into his pocket without counting it. You didn't see me. When the doctor left, the penthouse returned to quiet. Marco walked into the kitchen and did something the city would never believe. He cooked. Not because he liked it, because once, a long time ago, his mother had taught him that food could speak in places where words failed. And tonight, there was a child in his home who looked like hunger was her oldest friend. He simmered garlic and oil, crushed tomatoes, basil. Simple. Real. When he felt eyes, he turned. Lila stood in the doorway wearing one of Marco's oversized shirts like a nightgown. She clutched a pillow to her chest like armor. "Is Mama dead?" she asked. No tears. Just that hard, flat pragmatism children learn when adults keep failing them. Marco killed the flame and crouched down until he was eye level. "No, Piccola," he said. "She's sleeping." The doctor patched her up. Lila studied him with the brutal honesty of a small judge. "Are you gonna hurt us?" she asked. "No. Are you gonna make us pay you?" The question was so old in her mouth it made something inside Marco fracture. "No," he repeated, softer. "No money." Lila watched his hands, the same hands rumored to end men, and then his face. Finally, she nodded like she'd decided, for now, to believe. "I'm hungry," she announced. Marco's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Good, because my spaghetti will embarrass every restaurant in this city." Lila sat at the island and ate like she'd been saving strength. Between bites, she stared at the bubbling sauce as if it was magic. "My dad died," she said suddenly, wiping her chin. Marco paused mid-stir. "I'm sorry. He was police," Lila added, like she was saying the sky was blue. Marco went still. A cop's widow bleeding in an alley. Loan shark brutality with permission. Russians rumored to be sniffing around the ports. Pieces that didn't fit, starting to click. "What was his name?" Marco asked carefully. Lila frowned, thinking. Eli Hale. Marco knew the name. Detective Eli Hale, dead 2 years ago in a raid that stunk from miles away. Official story, hero. Street story, too curious. "The bad men said Daddy stole," Lila whispered. "So Mama has to pay." Marco watched the child finish her bowl like it was the first time she'd felt safe enough to be hungry. He carried her back to the guest room, tucked her into bed, and waited until her eyelids drooped. When he returned to the living room, Bruno stood there holding a manila folder like it was radioactive. "Talk," Marco said. Bruno opened it. "Nora Hale. Works double shifts. No priors. Husband was Detective Eli Hale. Death wasn't clean. Rumor says he found something on the Volkov outfit. The Russian pipeline moving through the port. They think she has what he found. A notebook. Names, drop points. Enough to bury them." Marco looked at Nora sleeping on his couch. So she wasn't just a victim. She was an unresolved problem. And the Russians didn't do unresolved. "Do we know if she has it?" Marco asked. Bruno shook his head. "No, but our guys picked up chatter. The Volkovs are sending a cleaner tomorrow." Marco poured himself a drink, not to relax, to focus. "Let them come," he said. Bruno exhaled slowly. "Boss, with respect, this is a war invitation." Marco's gaze didn't move from the rain-streaked window. "Good," he said. "I was getting bored." Nora woke to the smell of coffee and a stillness that felt expensive. Then pain hit. Her ribs screamed. She bolted upright, panic flooding her. "Lila!" she rasped, voice raw. "She's watching cartoons," a deep voice said from the corner. Nora whipped her head around. Marco sat in an armchair like he lived there, because he did, dressed in a white shirt with sleeves rolled up, espresso near his hand, a gun sitting casually on the table beside it like a second cup. "Where is she?" Nora demanded, forcing herself off the couch, swaying. "What did you do?" Marco stood, but didn't advance. He gave her space, like he understood prey. "She's fine," he said. "She ate. She's warm." Nora's eyes narrowed as recognition landed. "You're Santoro." Marco's face gave nothing away. "And you're Nora Hale, widow of Detective Eli Hale, currently being hunted by Russians who want what your husband found." Nora backed up until her shoulders hit the wall. "I don't have money," she said automatically, like it was a prayer. "I know," Marco replied, "and I know it isn't about money." His eyes sharpened. "It's about what Eli uncovered." Nora's mouth opened, then shut. Denial rose like reflex. "Don't lie," Marco said, voice dropping into something darker. "I dragged myself into this for your child. If you keep secrets, I can't protect her." At the mention of Lila, Nora's composure cracked. She slid down the wall, shaking. "They killed him," she whispered. "They executed him in our driveway. They tore our place apart, looking for his notebook." Marco crouched down, not touching her. "Where is it?" Nora lifted her chin, defiance bleeding through fear. "I burned it." Marco stared. "You burned it?" "I thought if it was gone, they'd leave," Nora said, voice breaking. "I told them it was ash. They don't believe me. They think I memorized it. They said if I don't produce it by Friday, they'll take my daughter." Marco stood and turned toward the window again, jaw tight. "They won't stop," he said. "Even if you give them nothing, you're a liability. They can't risk your knowledge, real or imagined. Then help me run, Nora pleaded. Mexico. Anywhere. Marco shook his head. You won't make it out of the city. They have cops, judges, clerks, eyes in airports. You run, you die. Nora stood, desperation sharp as glass. She grabbed his arm. The contact jolted him. Not lust. Something worse. Responsibility. What do I do? She whispered. Marco looked down at her fingers, clutching him like he was the last solid thing left. You stay here, he said. Nora blinked. What? You become mine, Marco said, then corrected immediately, voice hard. Under my protection. By the old rules, if I claim you publicly as significant, touching you becomes a declaration of war. Nora stared, horrified. You want me to pretend? Tonight there's a fundraiser, Marco said. Everyone will be there. Politicians, judges, Volkov's men, my own vultures. If I walk in with you on my arm and call you my fiancé, you become untouchable long enough for me to end this. Fiancé? Nora echoed, like the word tasted poisonous. You want your daughter alive, Marco said simply. This is how. Nora's throat tightened. She thought of Lila's small hands, Lila's bruised neck. She looked at Marco, the monster who had carried her out of an alley like she mattered. Why? She asked, voice small. Marco's gaze softened by a fraction. Because once, he said quietly, I was a kid in a back alley too, and no one showed up for my mother. The intercom buzzed. Bruno's voice snapped through. Boss, it's not the Russians, your uncle's downstairs. He says you dragged a cop widow into your home. He brought muscle. Marco's face hardened into stone. The Russians were outside the gate, but in his world, the knife that slips between your ribs usually belongs to family. Stay here, Marco told Nora. Lock the door. Nora reached for a brass lamp like she knew she might need it. Marco walked toward the elevator, checking the weight of his .45 like a habit, like a promise. Because if his uncle thought he could trade Nora to avoid a war, he was about to learn something Chicago already knew. Marco Santoro didn't give up what he'd decided to protect. Renato Santoro, Marco's uncle, didn't knock. Men like Renato didn't believe in asking permission. They believed in reminding you who raised you, who bled before you, and who felt entitled to your throne. The elevator opened into the lobby level. Renato was waiting with 4 men dressed too well to be honest. 60-something, black-dyed hair, gold watch, smile like a knife. He spread his arms wide like this was a reunion. There he is, Renato boomed. My nephew, the city's new saint. Marco stepped forward, Bruno and Nico flanking him like shadows. Go home, Marco said. Renato's smile didn't reach his eyes. Can't. The commission is whispering, you beating a collector in public, dragging in a cop's widow. It looks emotional. Emotional? Marco stepped into Renato's space, towering. I run this city. If I decide to light it up, I will. If I decide to rescue someone, I will. Renato's tone cooled. The Volkovs want her. Give her up and we keep the port deal. Keep her and we bleed. Marco's voice went flat. Then start stocking bandages. Renato stared at him, really stared, then spat onto the marble. Your funeral, kid. He walked off, leaving the threat hanging like smoke. Marco returned upstairs to find Nora by the door, lamp raised, eyes wide. He didn't comfort her with softness. He gave her orders because orders were safer than feelings. We're going to make you look untouchable, he said. Nora blinked. By doing what? By turning you into a problem nobody can afford to touch. The transformation began at 3 in the afternoon. Stylists arrived with rolling cases and clipped voices, treating Nora like a blueprint. Concealer covered bruises, pins adjusted seams. Hair was swept up to expose her neck. Regal, vulnerable, dangerous. Not prey anymore. Bait with teeth. Lila sat on the rug watching the process with round eyes. When Nora stepped into the emerald dress, the room went quiet. Silk hugged her like a second skin, a thigh-high slit that promised risk, a neckline that demanded attention. Lila whispered, awed, Mama, you look like a queen. Nora forced a smile because queens don't shake. Marco entered carrying a velvet box. He opened it. Inside was a diamond necklace heavy enough to feel like a collar made of starlight. This isn't a gift, Marco said as he fastened it around her throat. His fingers brushed her skin, warm against cold diamonds. It's armor. It belonged to my mother. Wearing it means you're under the Santoro bloodline. Nora's breath hitched. If this is armor, what's the battlefield? Marco's hand settled on her shoulders. His thumbs traced her collarbones like he was mapping where the world would try to hurt her. The Astoria charity gala, he said. Every predator in Chicago is going to be there. They'll stare. They'll judge. They'll search for fear. You cannot give it to them. Nora swallowed. I am afraid. Good, Marco murmured. Fear keeps you alive, but you do not show it. You look them in the eye like they're furniture. He offered his arm. Let's go remind the city who owns it, he said. They left Lila with Bruno's mother, an elderly Sicilian woman who arrived with rosary beads and homemade pastries, and a promise that sounded like a threat. Anyone touches that child, I bury them. The armored car slid through wet streets like a shark through water. At the hotel entrance, flashes exploded. Cameras, shouts, the city pretending it didn't crave blood. Marco stepped out first, tuxedo sharp, presence heavier than the rain. Then he offered Nora his hand. When she emerged, emerald silk catching light, the crowd faltered for a heartbeat. Marco placed a hand on her lower back. Proprietary, protective, unmistakable. They entered. The ballroom was a cathedral of wealth and rot. Crystal chandeliers, Mozart, politicians laughing beside men who'd ordered deaths like dinners. At the top of the staircase, Nora froze. Then Marco leaned in, lips near her ear like a lover. Breathe, he said softly. They're all scared men pretending they aren't. You're the only real thing here. Nora lifted her chin. They descended. For an hour, Marco introduced her to judges, senators, union bosses, names that made Nora's stomach turn. He never offered her last name, and nobody dared ask. Every time panic rose, Marco squeezed her fingers. An anchor. For moments, the act felt dangerously close to truth. Then the temperature changed. The east entrance parted like the room sensed a storm walking in. Sergei Volkov arrived. Big, scarred, pale-eyed. A bear in a cheap tuxedo. 4 men behind him who looked like they'd rather be holding rifles than champagne. Volkov walked straight to Marco and Nora. No smiles, no pleasantries. Marco Santoro, Volkov rumbled. His accent sounded like ice cracking. I hear you picked up someone else's mess. His gaze slid to Nora. Not her face, her body. Slow, insulting. Nora's skin crawled. You dressed her up, Volkov said. Pretty, still worthless. Marco's hand tightened on Nora's waist, painfully controlled. Careful, Marco replied. That's my fiancé. The word rang like a bell struck in a graveyard. Volkov laughed. Fiancé? Since when? Since last night. He stepped closer. Stop games. She has my property. The notebook. Give me the woman. Keep your ports. She doesn't have it, Marco said. It's gone. Then she is a loose end, Volkov replied. And loose ends get cut. Volkov leaned closer, eyes cutting to Nora. And the child, what was her name? Lila? Nora's blood turned to ice. Marco moved. He grabbed Volkov by the lapels and slammed him backward into a waiter carrying champagne. Crystal shattered. Gasps erupted. Marco held Volkov pinned in broken glass, face inches from his. Say her name again, Marco growled, voice booming through the ballroom, and I'll teach your men what burning feels like. To seal the claim in every watching eye, Marco yanked Nora close and kissed her. Not tender. A branding. Nora stiffened for a split second, then adrenaline and survival collided, and she kissed back like she was choosing her fate instead of being dragged by it. When Marco broke the kiss, Volkov's smile was gone. War, Volkov whispered. He snapped his fingers. The music stopped. Marco's instincts screamed. Movement on the balcony, the glint of metal, the wrong kind of shadows. Down! Marco shouted, throwing Nora to the floor and covering her with his body. Gunfire shredded the ballroom. Crystal exploded. Screams swallowed Mozart. Bullets chewed through tables and silk and flesh. Marco rolled, shielding Nora, pulling his .45 from the holster. He fired with calm brutality. 2 shots. A man on the balcony dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Move! Marco barked, dragging Nora low through chaos. Nora crawled, palms sliced by glass, dress tearing, lungs burning. She stayed glued to Marco because death loved distance. Bruno burst through smoke with Nico, clearing a path. They blocked front, Bruno roared. Kill box. Kitchen, Marco ordered. They slammed through swinging doors into stainless steel and terrified chefs hiding under counters. They sprinted through ovens and prep stations to the loading bay. Outside, rain slapped them like a warning. Volkov's men poured out firing. Bullets pinged off metal. Bruno shoulder-charged a laundry van, breaking the lock, throwing the doors open. In! Nora tumbled inside onto bags of dirty towels. Marco followed, slamming the doors as bullets struck the van's hull like fists. The van peeled out, tires screaming into wet night. In the pitch-black back, Nora lay panting among laundry that smelled like bleach and panic. Diamonds glittered at her throat like a cruel joke. Marco sat opposite her, tux torn, blood seeping down his arm. He grimaced, trying to keep his breathing controlled. Where are we going? Nora whispered. finally letting terror win. Marco's eyes were a dark ocean in the dim light. "Not home," he said. "Then where?" He leaned his head against the metal wall, exhaustion and calculation fighting in his gaze. "To the only place they won't think to look," he said. "We're going underground." Hours later, the crypts beneath St. Bridget's Church smelled like wet earth and old prayers. A kerosene lamp flickered, turning shadows into ghosts. Marco sat shirtless on a crate while Nora stitched his wound with a steady hand, pouring stolen altar wine over torn flesh. He hissed but didn't pull away. In the lamplight, Nora didn't look like prey anymore. She looked like someone who'd survived becoming valuable. "Why did you claim me?" she asked quietly, tying the knot. Marco's hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing dirt away. "Because once they see you as mine," he said, "touching you becomes the same as touching my throat." The iron door groaned. Bruno entered carrying Lila asleep on blankets and a satellite phone. "She's safe," Bruno said. "But the city's bleeding. Volkov's bombing collection points. And Renato is on the line." Marco took the phone. Renato's voice crackled. "The commission wants to hand you over to stop the blood." Marco's eyes went dead calm. "I'm ending it tonight," he said. He hung up and turned to Nora. "We're going to the shipyards," he said. "We're going to make Volkov think he's winning. And then we're going to erase him." Midnight. The shipyards were rust and floodlights and freezing rain. Marco stood in the open, alone, with Nora 2 steps behind him holding a black notebook taken from the church. Pages filled with hymns, not names. A convoy of SUVs arrived. Volkov stepped out under an umbrella, grinned sharp. "The devil comes to surrender," Volkov called. "How romantic." Marco raised his hands. "Business. War kills profit. Take the book. Take her. Let me walk." Volkov laughed and snatched the notebook when Nora offered it. He flipped it open, his face twisted. "Hymns?" he snarled. Realization hit too late. Floodlights on cranes ignited, blinding his men. Dozens of silhouettes appeared above. Italian soldiers. Renato's voice boomed from the shadows. "Chicago's closed." Marco hadn't begged Renato to surrender. He'd reminded him of the oldest rule. Italians might hate each other, but nobody lets Russians take the city. "Fire!" Marco roared. The yard became a storm of bullets. Volkov's men fell. SUVs turned into smoking sieves. In the chaos, Volkov grabbed Nora, yanking her back, pistol pressed to her temple. "Stop!" he screamed. Silence slammed down. Volkov backed toward the dock edge, dragging Nora toward black water. Marco stepped forward, 45 steady. "Let her go," he said. "It's over." Nora's eyes met Marco's, and in that instant she decided. She would not be afraid forever. She stomped Volkov's foot hard enough to make him gasp, then slammed her head back into his face. Volkov's grip loosened for half a second. Marco's shot was a needle through chaos. Bang! Volkov dropped, toppling backward off the dock into icy water like a stone. Nora collapsed to her knees, shaking. Marco was there instantly, arms around her, face buried in her hair like he needed to inhale proof she was real. Rain fell on them like baptism. Renato approached, cigar glowing. "The Russians are finished," he said. "But you marrying a cop widow. Breaking rules." Marco stood, pulling Nora up beside him, hand firm at her waist. "Then rewrite them," Marco said. "She's not a civilian. She's my queen." Renato stared at him, then slowly dipped his head. "Long live the boss," he murmured. 6 months later, in the lakeshore garden, a small wedding bloomed. No press, no spectacle, just family. Lila ran in a white dress, laughing as Bruno pretended to be a bear and let her capture him. Nora stood on the balcony in simple white, diamonds still gleaming like a warning to the world. Marco came behind her, arms wrapping her waist, chin on her shoulder. "The city is quiet," he said softly. "For now," Nora replied. She turned in his arms, eyes sharp with the knowledge of what peace costs. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we face it together." Marco kissed her forehead. "Not anymore," he whispered. "Not while I'm breathing." And that's how one terrified 5-year-old, soaked in rain with blood on her hands, walked into a room of killers and made the most dangerous man in Chicago remember what it felt like to save someone.